Well, hello my friends, it's Shawn Petite and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Look at this beauty, so much fun. Here are the supplies that we'll be using today. So, full disclosure here, I started and actually deleted the first few frames of this video. So what I've done is I'm working on a 12 by 12 MDF board. I have covered it with some wonderful vintage papers that you can see there to the left. And then I have used this stencil with gesso to complete the pattern across this piece. Those collage papers are going to be available. They're a new collage pack in the shop. So I have stenciled all the way around. That's the new modern 6 pattern stencil. And I've got that dry, and now I'm just taking the same gesso and I'm using my palette knife to just make some random bits and marks and skips across there so that it doesn't look quite so perfect in pattern. But I'm working really hard to let that wonderful vintage writing show through, and it does perfectly. I just love it. So I'm just kind of skipping across the piece here with some gesso. I've got some Lucas paint in teal, and I have put some water with it, just a wet brush, and just doing a wash across the piece to get some color down so that it's not so stark white. And of course I had to choose teal because it's a happy color and this is a happy piece. I'm pulling that back with a rag and just not pulling it back all the way around, but unevenly across the piece, so that it looks like watercolor and modeled and aged and all those kinds of things. So now that I've got that washed down and I've picked it back up again, I'm coming back with my palette knife and doing the same skipping with the paint, just for some variety, some interest. Picking that back up just to mat it down and lighten it up just a little bit. Picking that up with the towel. And now I've got some raw umber and I'm going to do a wash over that as well. And I'm going to do basically the same process. I'm going to make it real uneven so that it looks really weathered and aged, but super light so that my design shows through and the papers show through. And I'll darken up the edges. Kind of pull that back and give it a real good aged, you know, yummy goodness, my style kind of feel. And still using watered down raw umber. All of the supplies will be listed on the blog, and the link to the blog is down below in the YouTube description box. So now I've sprayed a little bit of alcohol on my rag, and I'm just going back over the piece because the stenciled areas leave a raised edge, and I can pull that back up and give it and just kind of lighten it up just a bit. So now I've got my spring wreath out here, and I just played and had some fun. So I started out with a Lucas Krill paint in olive green, and then I grabbed the color Hooker's Green, which always kind of makes me chuckle. Hooker's Green from, I think that's Holbein. I'm not sure. But again, all the supplies will be listed on the blog. And that Hooker's Green, I needed a darker color so it would stand out a little bit more, so it would be more prominent. So that Hooker's Green, love it. It's perfect color. And then I'm also going to add in some green gold here in the leaves. So this is the spring leaves. And I love being able to take your stencils and use them as your guide and just add to an additional element to an already stenciled area. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just extending that wreath out just a little bit. And so I'm using that Hooker's Green, and then I've got the green gold from Sennelier. And I'm just kind of adding some leaves to my wreath because I didn't want it to be super perfect. This is a playful piece. It's joyful. I have my story that I'm telling. And so I wanted it to not be perfect and even. And I love the spring wreath stencil design, and it'll be perfect just like it is in a different application, but for this one I wanted to add more to the wreath, so that's why I added the leaves. So I've got my spring, this is cherry blossom stencil, and I'm adding this, I'm just using gesso. And I am adding my pattern pretty evenly throughout the wreath, and these are kind of the background bits and filler and that kind of thing, and so just adding those around. And I'm also kind of deciding, like, oh, do I need more leaves here or there or where, to kind of balance it out. I want it to feel balanced, at least a little bit anyway. And still using the same colors, the Hooker's green and the green gold. So this is the lavender stencil, and all of my stencils I try to design so that you, like I always say, use your stencils as your guide. So these have long stems on them, and of course I'm not using the long stem, but I'm just using the heads of the flowers. And all of my stencils, or the stencils that you have, you can pick and choose what you want to use in your stencils and make them work for a certain project. And so this is the lavender stencil, and I just chose not even all of the heads of the flowers, maybe just a couple, and then in different sizes as well. And same with this one. This is the tulip, and I'm just using the heads of the flowers for the wreath. I am using Lucas paint. I use Lucas paints in the purple, and again those colors will be listed. And then I'm again using Lucas paints for the flowers as well. I've used a variety of colors. I mixed some orange and some yellow, and I know there's a specific name for them, but orange, yellow, and then magenta for the flowers. And I'm using 2 different sizes of the flower heads. Actually, I think I use all 3 sizes because, again, I want it to feel balanced, but I don't want it to feel perfect. I want it to feel natural. And, you know, they're all different if you were to look at an actual spring wreath. So now I'm going to come back in and do all the fluffing, all the zhuzhing, all the wonderful things that make our images that we've just stenciled out not feel so stenciled out. And so I'm going back into the same color that I used as I stenciled, and I'm adding some white gesso. And so that lightens up the color of the actual paint, or it might be just straight gesso, just to add some interest and some depth and some dimension to those flowers. And I'm just going right over the pattern that is already there with quick brush strokes. And this technique of going back over the stenciled area, and you don't have to, they were beautiful the way they were. I just, for me, like to add that little bit of painterly touch. It just makes it feel so much richer and more artistic, in my opinion, for this application. Adding some highlights to the lavenders now, and again I've gone back in with the white gesso into my purple and just kind of mixed up a little bit lighter color, and I'm adding that to the lavender flower bunches. Now I have taken some of that yellow and added some white to it, a lot of white to it actually, just to give a little bit of different hue in my white cherry blossoms, and adding just a touch of that to the petals of the cherry blossoms. And then I actually took the same shape that was stenciled out and created a few of my own outside of the stenciled area. And I'm doing the same things to my leaves now. I've taken the same colors that I've been using and adding just a bit of gesso, again to add some highlight and some depth, add some interest. And so to kind of go along with the joyful part of this piece, I wanted it to feel very whimsical, or somewhat whimsical, I should say. And so that's why I added the wisps. It felt very contained and very normal. And I wanted just a little bit more interest. And so I added those little wispy green bits and things like that around the wreath to make it a little bit more fun. I sketched out my Create Joy. I didn't have a pattern or anything. I just kind of did it by hand. And then I have some black paint that I've watered down just a tiny bit. And I'm going back over that, and we'll thicken up the lines as I go back to give it some kind of calligraphy kind of feel. Not too much. I wanted it to feel very hand done. But I'm just kind of going back over, and we'll thicken up some areas. And I love how it turned out. I'm using it's called a fine liner paintbrush as well, which helps when you're doing detailed work like that. So now I'm just coming back and adding my shading. Gotta have some charcoal pencil in there. And for this piece, I am not shading everything because I absolutely love the way it looks. What I am doing is I'm shading the outer edges of the wreath for sure, and then I will go around some of the bigger flowers and shade that in, and some of the inner leaves, but I'm not going over everything on this piece like I typically do. I'm just kind of creating an outer shadow around the piece. And then I add a few more squiggly lines to make my heart happy with my charcoal pencil. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed today's project. I hope you stick around for the conversation at the end. It's about how we can create joy even in the midst of difficult places in our lives, and how important it is, and what I feel like the key is to creating joy. So I went through a couple of white pens, and I usually always do when I'm using white pens. I started out with, this was a Liquitex paint marker, and I actually ended up going back to that. I started out with I had a gel pen out, and I had a couple other pens out, but this one did the best job for what I wanted. I wanted to just kind of create some highlight in my words, and then around the piece, again, to make this fun, add some dots, and just make it real playful. Because, I mean, we are talking about joy. So I will continue to fuss with this and add dots and dashes and things like that all the way around the piece in white and black, and then shade the edges with my charcoal, with my black soft pastel. And that's it, my friends. Super fast, super easy. Use your stencils as your guide. I hope you enjoyed today's project. If you did, subscribe and like and share all your questions. I do my best to get back to you if you have any. And then make sure to stick around for the conversation at the end. You don't forget to get your collage pack that is available. And I will see you next week. Well, hello loves and happy Sunday. This does just create joy in me. I just positively love it. I love it from the background to all the flowers to just the kind of freeness of it. It just makes me happy. I love it, love it, love it. Couple of things. The stencils that I used will be on sale this week. And then the collage pack, this is a new collage pack in the shop that will be available for instant download, or we are now printing. We're sending out printed collage packs, and I just want to show you, these are just a couple that we had printed out for an order, and the paper is light, fast, and heavy duty, and will hold up and all of that kind of goodness. All the description of the paper and what it's printed on will be in the collage pack area, and so that you can either get it by instant download, you can get this instant download, or printed. And we're super excited to be able to print that, and we're also doing prints of my prints. Instead of prints on wood, we're doing actual prints so that you can frame them as well. So those are showing up slowly but surely in the shop. We're almost done getting all of that changed over, so lots of fun new stuff for 2020. Okay, so let me see, what else did I have to tell you? I think that's it. I went over everything throughout the video. So create joy. So I'm always usually responding to what is happening in my own life, or what emails I get, or maybe something that I read. That's usually where I'm creating from. And so this week I had a conversation with over email with a gal who was just really struggling with just not feeling fulfilled. And that she just didn't feel like she had any joy, and I, we talked a little bit, and I just want to share with you kind of what I shared with her. And so sometimes in our life just isn't always joyful. And even when we say we choose joy or we create joy, sometimes life is really hard all the way around us during that time that we're trying to create some joy. But we can choose it, and we can create it even in the hardest, most difficult places of our lives. And the only way that we can really actually do that is by choosing gratitude. Finding one single thing that we can be grateful for in our routine, in our day, in our work, in our creative space, in our relationships. Just one thing. If we can find one thing to be grateful for, and then write it down. You guys, writing it down makes a huge difference. And really, there's, and I've said it over and over again, but there's something that happens between our head and our hand, and that's our heart. It goes, it's kind of that process, there's something that happens in that when we physically write out what we're grateful for. And we write it out a few times. And then we write it out again. And then we put it somewhere where we can see it. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be a massive thing. It doesn't have to be anything in particular except what brings you joy in this moment, even if it's difficult. Some seasons, believe me, are so much easier to find joy in. But we're human beings and we live in a crazy world, and sometimes it's just not easy to find the joy. And sometimes we're so busy and, just all the ugh and the stuff. And we're trying to grow and grow ourselves and learn about ourselves. And in that process, it's really hard. And so sometimes it's hard to find the joy in wherever you are, in whatever situation you're at. But if you start with gratitude, of being grateful for getting up, for being able to talk to your kids on the phone, or pet the dog, or create some flowers, or whatever it might be, even just having a conversation, a hard conversation, that could be joy as well. There's just so many things that we can say that I am grateful for. I'm grateful that I was able to do that. And we write it down over and over and over. And there's something that happens in that gratitude that begins to bear this seed of joyfulness. And I don't want, when I talk about joy, it's not like this rah-rah kind of thing. It's just a knowing. It's a knowing in my soul that I'm going to make it, that things are okay, that I'm going to weather the storm, or I'm going to celebrate whatever it is at some point. It's this kind of peaceful place, this joy. And then sometimes it is like this big, huge celebration of a win that you've been trying for a long time. Sometimes it is that. But sometimes we physically have to choose. And you know what? I'm going to say not sometimes, but all the time. We have to physically choose joy, physically choose gratitude. Because in our crazy world, it's so negative sometimes, all the time. It's just, it's not a place where people are regularly joyful and are talking about what they're grateful for, or how they helped someone, or what they created, or all those things that might naturally bring us joy. And so we have to choose it. We have to create it ourselves. And the only way that I have found to do that is by being grateful for something, one thing, and then writing it down. So, my loves, I hope that you are finding and creating your joy in your journey, in your walk, however that is. And for me, so often, finding and creating my joy is the physical act of creating. That's where I can get all the stuff out, and I can do all the whining and crying and all those kinds of things as I'm creating in my work. And that expresses how I feel, and then I can find what I'm grateful for in that process. But it works for me, and I know that you have your way of finding your joy. And I want to say this one thing. If you are consistently struggling with joy, defeat and doubt and fear, and not being able to find anything to be grateful for, I want you to promise me that you will talk to someone, that you will talk to a licensed therapist, counselor, and if you see somebody and they don't feel like they click with you, find somebody else, because it's so important. It's our soul, it's our mental health to do that work, take care of ourselves so that we have something to give other people, the world, our community, our family. So take care of your soul. If you feel like you can't get out of that space of not finding anything to be grateful for, see somebody, talk to somebody. There is nothing to be fearful and shameful about in that. I have done it many times, many years, and many seasons. And I still hear my therapist's voice in my head when I have anxiety attacks or when I have to deal with something. So I just want to say that sometimes clinical depression is not a matter of just finding gratitude and creating joy. Sometimes there's other things that need to happen in that process, and you need to talk to somebody to get that figured out. And take care of you. Take care of your soul. You're so important to me, to others, to the universe that you are in. All right, my loves. Have a wonderful Sunday. Create your joy today. Share your joy. Live your joy. Be grateful. And I hope that you always know that you are loved.